I forgot to record. Okay. So I'm recording now on Zoom and essentially you can't grow. You can't lead an organization from being in the weeds, right? You cannot lead or grow an organization if you're stuck doing administrative work, right? So that's what we're going to discuss today. And for those who are new here, my name is Stacy. I'm a nonprofit consultant. I currently help organizations that are making between 1 million and $10 million in annual revenue with their leadership strategy and also capacity building and operations. Okay. So I help them in different ways. But if you are a smaller nonprofit, there is something for you as well, because then I support my smaller nonprofits in our signature course called the Nonprofit Navigator, which is a self-paced course, but also that has support where I'm able to support you building your systems and operations to ensure that you fill the gaps that are necessary to ensure that you're able to grow in the direction that you need to grow. So definitely let me know that you're here in the comments where you're joining from, and we'll get to talk a little bit more. Okay. So today we're going to talk about, like I said, something that's keeping way too many nonprofit leaders overwhelmed, underfunded, and underperforming. And that is being buried in administrative work, right? So I want you to drop a heart in the comments if you feel like you're constantly in your inbox, you're scheduling stuff, you're chasing receipts, or you're fixing what your team should have handled. If you feel like that's you, I want you to drop a heart in the comments, because this is what I mean by doing administrative work. You are doing babysitting, okay? And as the leader of your nonprofit organization, that's not the space that you want to be in. So I'm going to call it out for what it is. It's babysitting at the end of the day. You're managing tasks, you're managing day-to-day activities, and that's taking you away from activities that could help your nonprofit move forward. Okay. So the cost of that, I want to be very blunt about it, is when you are doing everything, you're actually leading nothing, right? If you're updating the websites, right? You're creating Canva graphics, you're running payroll manually, you're rewriting donor thank you letters yourself. Like, it's taking your time away from doing things that you could actually be doing. Um, Now, I want you to ask yourself, now, what's the most admin tasks you find yourself doing weekly that makes you say, why am I the one doing this? Like, if you never ask yourself that question, I want you to ask yourself that question right now. Like, what do you find yourself doing every week that you keep asking yourself, why am I the one doing this? Like, whatever it is, I want you to drop it in the comments and chat, whatever it is, wherever we are, because I want us to have a conversation about it and kind of figure out, like, is there a better way? Because if you feel like there's an administrative task that you are doing day in, day out on a weekly basis to ensure that your nonprofit is functioning properly, then that's a problem. Okay, because you know me and data, right? So according Nonprofit Leadership Alliance, right, 60% of nonprofit leaders actually report spending more time on administrative or crisis management than on strategy. And that's one thing I've been saying since the beginning. Nonprofit organizations, considering your status, you're still a business, but you have to be strategic in how you do business to generate revenue and generate revenue to support your activities. Be being a nonprofit organization is not a business model, right? You are still a business, but you need to figure out how to ensure that model works for the mission that you have and the vision that your nonprofit has. Because then I don't want you to think that the tax exempt status exempts you from actually doing business, because you are a business and you need to function accordingly. Okay. So with the nonprofit spending more time on administrative tasks and crisis management, is actually backwards, right? That's not where your time should be spent. And you're actually doing activities that are not benefiting you or benefiting your nonprofit organization. And it's putting you in a position where there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of burnout, and there's a lot of times where you feel like you can't catch a break. Like you keep going around in circles, like this person needs this person needs that. You're not able to actually delegate in the way you're supposed to because you're doing everything everybody is supposed to be doing. Or you're basically answering a million and one questions because you have no systems in place and your operations are out of whack. Like, I need you to like come to a place where administrative tasks and managing crises in your organization is not something that you focus on. Okay, because like I said, that is a backward way of thinking in terms of your nonprofit organization. There are other ways to do that, right? Like one way you can think about it is that you can what happens when you do that is you can't think ahead, right? You're not able to think ahead because you're constantly thinking about what fire am I putting out next? Like, what am I doing next to ensure that my team is able to do their work because they can't figure it out, right? You're not able to come together with your team to actually have a vision and you can start implementing a plan to reach that vision. And you're always reacting. You're never really leading because, yes, your team looks up to you because of your title, but you're not able to lead them in a way that they are getting the best version of you because you're always doing the things that you shouldn't be doing, right? Like if you are in a leadership position within an organization and the organization has a mission and vision, but you're just focused on task management and not really leading the organization to meet its vision, that's where things get a little bit sticky. They get a little bit complicated and you're not able to do the things that you need to do. Okay. Now, there are different ways that this shows up within a nonprofit organization, which we're going to talk about. Let me move my Instagram camera. In different ways it shows up, right? I was working with an executive director, and the organization was bringing in about $1.2 million, right? And that executive director, incredible, visionary, passionate, but caveat, they were stuck, right? Why? Because that organization was chasing down timesheets, processing checks, redoing every board slide, like every time there's a meeting, and that's not necessary. So one thing that happened when we're able to put systems together, organize the files, and ensure that there's a system in place, like just plug in and plug in what you need for every meeting and not have to recreate everything every time you have a meeting, you're able to delegate operations to a program manager because those things are set up to ensure, like these systems are set up to ensure that you're able to delegate it effectively, right? Another thing that we did is set up a calendar, a shared calendar with the team and standard operating procedures and accountability system. Now, if you never thought about it, a shared calendar ensures everybody knows what everybody is working on and when they're available or not available so people can have less they can feel like they're not chasing everybody. Hey, I need you to do this. They know other people have things on their plate, and that's very important, right? Standard operating procedure, that's another important thing in the operation of your nonprofit organization. You need to be able to have standard operating procedures to determine whether or not what the person is supposed to be doing, what the person in that position. Like if you have donor engagement SOPs or outreach and the SOPs are clear. It's not like every time, oh, Jane donated $10 at Big Day of Giving. What are we supposed to do? There's a SOP, especially like for Big Day of Giving. If you're in the Sacramento region, Big Day of Giving is a big thing and it happened yesterday. And we're going to talk about that too. So a standard operating procedure, when somebody donates, what's the procedure? Who contacts them? What's the touch point? What we do and stuff like that to thank them and encourage future donations. Like there should be a standard operating procedure for that if that's something that your organization does on a regular basis. Now think of tasks that are repetitive, right? Tasks that are consistent and how your organization can create standard operating procedures to ensure that whomever joins the team is able to have that level of transparency and consistency in the work that they do. So they're not recreating the wheel all the time. And also you're able to delegate and not do the work yourself. Because then do you have a lot to do? Yes. But do you have time to focus on building these systems? If you're a smaller organization, you need to make the time, or you're gonna feel like you're gonna feel like you're running around in circles, always burning out and never able to actually move forward. Okay, so that's the risk that you run when you do not have systems set up for your organization. An accountability system in place, that's the third thing I said in this, like that next item, line item. You need accountability system because your team members need to know, like, okay, you took ownership of this task. How are we going to make sure that you follow through on this task, and what are ways that we can keep you accountable? Do we have a communication system to ensure that we're following up with one another on these tasks, that these projects that are listed? And especially if you don't have a program manager, like it makes it difficult because there's nobody to like look at these things. So there needs to be somebody on the team that's able to manage the programs and the activities. So there is an accountability system in place, right? Now, the last thing that I was able to work with this executive director on is creating a space for that ED to talk to donors and strategic partners, right? And what that allowed that organization to do is raise four figures, high four figures, right? Because then they've never raised any money in terms of donations. They focus on grants. So in terms of diversifying revenue, like raising that amount of money was a big thing to them, but it was about creating space for them to actually speak to donors and strategic partners where they were able to do that in 3 months. Now, the other thing that I want you to do is I want you to think, if you had 5 hours back this week, just five, right? What would you do with it? If 5 of the hours that you're spending on the activities, if you had that time back, what would you do with it? I want you to be honest. I don't care if you put it in the comments. I don't care if you write it in a notebook. What would you be able to do with those 5 hours? And I don't care if it's sleeping, whatever it is. I want you to write down what you would do with the 5 hours that you gain back from not being drowned in administrative tasks with your nonprofit organization, because that is the difference between operating and leading. Okay, because then sometimes we're so busy just doing the grunt work. We're not leading the organization in the way we're supposed to. Okay, you can't lead an organization to growth or in the direction that you want to from administrative land. Okay, on an operational standpoint, if that's not your job, you cannot do what you're looking to do. Because if you're stuck in the details, you're not really driving the mission, because you're focused on the details that are needed to drive the mission. You're not focused on the mission itself and what's needed for this mission to move forward. Because if your hand's in every pot, right? Who's tasting the soup to make sure it's fine? Because then some people like to have their hands in every pot, but for what? Like, you should be able to look at the big picture and start directing and leading people in the right direction because you have the bandwidth for that. And I know John Maxwell says leadership that develops daily, not in a day, right? But if you're stuck doing tasks that should be for a $25 per hour role, how are you going to grow into a 250,000 leader your organization needs, right? Growing as a leader requires that you know what to delegate and what to release, because you can't control everything. You can control yourself. And that means that you're able to take a step back and realize that some of your tasks are not going to be in the day-to-day. Like, I had a conversation with a woman who became an executive director of a large nonprofit organization. Today's what, Friday? On Wednesday, I had that conversation with her, and she said the hardest thing for her becoming an executive director, considering she used to work in the organization, is realizing that she won't be able to support people in the way that she did within her role as staff member. Because as executive director, her role is different. And when she said that, I'm like, somebody got it, and nobody had to tell her. I don't know if somebody told her. I hope she figured it out on her own. But when you're the executive director or a leader of an organization, you you come to a point where you realize like the day-to-day work and being in the trenches is no longer where you need to be. Because being an executive director or a leader in the organization means you're driving the mission, and that requires a different level of presence and leadership from your part. That requires that you show up in a way that your staff and your team member cannot. So your staff and team member, they have their roles, they have activities, they have tasks that they need to accomplish. That is not the things that you need to do. If you're not putting your time where it needs to be, then what's happening is your organization is always going to be in a position where you feel flustered, the organization's not able to grow, and it's not able to do the things that it needs to do. Now, we're going to call it what it is. When you're not able to do that, it's because you've normalized this function to a point it doesn't make sense. Okay? You've normalized that level of dysfunction. You think doing everything yourself is faster. Met too many people that do that. Well, they don't know how to do it. I'm just gonna do it myself. It's faster. They don't know how to do it because you never took the time to teach them. You have no SOPs in place. You have no structure in place to ensure they're able to learn how to do it, right? You don't trust your team to execute. You think they don't know that? They're going to let you do it. Because then if I find somebody that wanted to do my job for me, do you think I would not let them? Let them. Okay, I don't know if you, what was her name? Robin. My brain's not working this morning, but I know her first name is Robin. No, her last name is Robin. I don't know. My brain's not working, but don't judge me for that. But she has a book called Let Them, right? And sometimes you have to let them because that's what your team's gonna do to you if you're micromanaging and picking up everything they're supposed to do without teaching them how to do it. They have no ownership on what's happening in the organization because you feel like your hand needs to be in every pot. Your hand does not need to be in every pot. You need to teach them how to take control of this soup or whatever they're making because it's theirs. You need to empower them as a leader to take ownership of what they're doing and show up in a way. And that will require that you build some systems on the back end to ensure that you do that, or that will require that you hire somebody to do the operations for you because you cannot do that. And that's the way that Savage Coaching and Consulting is assisting larger nonprofits now, like mid-sized nonprofits, 1 million to 10 million, because oftentimes your mid-level management staff does not have the time to focus on the operation. So that's why fractional COO support is one thing that we offer now, is to ensure that organizations like yours are able to hire somebody to fill that gap so your mid-level management staff can focus on leading their team instead of managing tasks and the operations and different things that are not conducive to program and service implementation, right? So we'll leave it at that. Let's just leave it there. Now, the other thing is that I want you to realize is the sad truth about it all. If you are at a point where you're in administrative land, I want you to remember you cannot lead from burnout because that doesn't earn respect, right? Doing everything is not a badge of honor. I want you to remember that part too. It's a breakdown that's waiting to happen because if you're doing everything, one day you're going to break down because one day you're going to tap out and be so angry. I've been there, so I can speak to it. And I realized what my strengths were and what I needed to do. That's why I do the work I do. And the other thing I want you to realize is you can't plan the future when you're fixing the present. every day. Okay. Again, you cannot plan your future or the future of your organization when you're stuck fixing everything in the present. Okay. Now, there are different things I want you to do. I always leave with some actionable steps that you can take. Now, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to figure out, like, do you have a delegation map? Is there someone you can delegate some activities to? I want you to think about that today, right? Like, what systems do you need to build to ensure that clarity exists within your organization? Okay. Now, lastly, one thing I'll say is different ways I help my clients, my smaller nonprofits, how I help them implement like different strategies to help support their organization is we work on a capacity audit where their time is actually going, right? Delegation map. So we map the delegation together. What is it that can be automated, assigned, or outsourced? The third thing that we work on is revenue and operations alignment. We want to make sure that your team has the clarity it needs to do as much as they can do in a smart way. Because oftentimes you're so focused on doing everything, you're not considering, do we have the money for that? Do we have the capacity for that? Our team can't do that. That's too much on the team. We don't have enough people to do that work anyway. And the last thing is the strategic calendar. So you're not running around every week wondering what's urgent. So these are things I help my smaller nonprofits with is the strategic session, right? It's a 90-minute session, but before the session, we do some homework and ensure that we have a lot of the information needed so the session can be very impactful and you can leave with as much knowledge as possible because you do get a action plan, a PDF afterwards in the recording of the call to ensure that you have the tools needed to start implementing what we talked about during the session, right? And your board and leadership team is welcome, always welcome to attend, not just the founder, not just the executive director, right? So whomever on the team that needs to be in that session will be in that session, and then we can get to work. Now, if that seems like a session that you need within your organization, definitely book a session with me. Let me get the link on my other screen, because then that's one thing I forgot to do is put the link for that. Woo! Book a strategy session. So if you are on Facebook, that's going to be in the comments of this live, right? If you are on Instagram, check the link in my bio. It's still on my Stan store. You can get it from my Stan store as well. You can still book it because it'll be open until July 1st. So definitely book a strategy session. Okay. So we can break down what's not working for your organization and identify where you need support, build a plan that you can actually follow. Okay, if you're not quite ready for that yet, I need you to sign up for my newsletter, and the Beacons link should be in my bio and in the comments. So definitely click on my Beacons link so you can sign up for the newsletter and keep getting information on how I can support your organization and different information that you need. Okay, so if you found this helpful, definitely let me know in the comments or send me a DM. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have an amazing Friday and weekend because it's been quite an interesting week and always excited for the weekend. And I hope you have a fun weekend and talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.